Okay, so I read that you're in the 2008 interview. You said your life goal was to become a commentator. Now, going from working in racing to becoming a commentator, it's still quite a leap. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, it was. Do you know, it was the way it all started with the race calling and the commentating was down at Philip Hobbs's, and obviously a lot of point-to-point, big point-to-point country down there. And when I was riding out, I'd sort of fool around a little bit, and you'd call the horses in the string, and you might even try and auction one as well, just for a laugh. And I like the aspect of it. I thought the sort of being descriptive about a race and describing a race was something that appealed. And I was down there. I was probably 20, 21, and I went along to Holnicott, our local point-to-point, and the late great Alfie Sherrin was the commentator at the time, and I sort of asked him if I could call a race, and I'd spun in this yarn that I'd done it before, which is probably a little bit foolish, but he sort of bought it anyway, which was handy, and I called this 5-runner intermediate race, and I'd hate to watch it back now because I imagine it would be dreadful, but I'd done that, and I thought this is quite fun, I enjoy this, and it just took off from there really. And the point-to-pointing for me was a great schooling ground, a bit like it is with the horses and the jockeys and the trainers still. For me, I was able to go, end up calling point. And once Alfie retired, I ended up sort of getting the majority of his fixtures, and I sort of created my own little niche point-to-pointing and race calling, and you'd earn a little bit of pocket money, a little bit of cash by doing it, and that was my focus every weekend, was to go to the point-to-point, learn the colours, learn the runners, and go calling the races, and I just love it. There's nothing else I'd want to do. I think it's just a great way to earn a living, and that's sort of how it really started in regards to sort of just the local point-to-points. Really.
Right. So you're at places like Bratton Down calling point-to-points in the pouring rain.
That's right.
In winter, and then all of a sudden, or was it all of a sudden, you're in Malaysia and Singapore calling races?
Yeah. So as you say, sort of trudging around all the point-to-point. I've called in some very, very peculiar commentary positions. I mean, one of the best ones actually was out in Wales. It was basically the bucket of a tractor, which had a bit of a sort of a metal frame around it, and that got sent up in the air, and that was my calling position, which was a bit hair-raising, but I just loved it. I thought it was great. And then I was at Richard Barber's, the late Richard Barber's at the time, working for Harry Fry, and I'd seen via Twitter that there was a job in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, and I never ever considered I'd be good enough. I mean, not so much not good enough that I couldn't call a race, but the fact that my CV has just read point-to-point races, and that was sort of the extent of my experience at the time. But I mean, somehow miraculously I got this job, and I actually got flown out to Malaysia for the interview, and initially I didn't want to go. I turned it down, and then they asked me to reconsider, and I think, having learnt a bit more, the reason they'd done that is because I believe I was the only one that actually applied, so the job was always mine. And I went out there. I called a few races this week, the weekend I went, and I just thought, well, my aim, as you say, and my life's ambition was to be a race caller. And I thought, okay, it isn't Ascot or Goodwood or Cheltenham or Aintree, but I'm going to get paid to be a commentator. I thought, this is great, and I was lucky. They have a lot of races in Asia, 9, 10, 11 race cards, so you're always calling plenty of races, plenty of trial races, and yeah, I came back and they'd offered me the job, and I accepted it, and then shortly after, January 2014, I was on a plane a one-way ticket to Kuala Lumpur, which was a bit scary, but I suppose I've always been a little bit nomadic. I just I'm happy to sort of get up and go and sort of settle wherever I drop my hat, sort of thing. So yeah, that's how it went.
So I'm guessing you're on the plane with Rosetta Stone Learn Malaysian on for 13 hours or whatever it was.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because people always say, how do you get on with the language barrier and that sort of thing, but Kuala Lumpur and Malaysia probably more so, in regards to the language, and obviously the Malay and the sort of the different languages and dialects they have there. But you get by, you get by, and you pick up little things and little sayings and phrases. Whereas where I am now in Singapore, it's probably 85% of people speak very good English. So, the language has never been an issue. And again, it was very much a step into the unknown, because I didn't really know where I was going. Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, I'd never been to Asia. You were having to have sort of jabs and different things, and just to make sure you were sort of inoculated against all these different diseases and stuff. And you just think, wow, this is a bit mad. But we got by, and it's all in English, and a lot of expatriates there, got trainers and jockeys, and yeah, just a really good, fun community and group of people to be around. You know, and again, I learned so much. Obviously, being in Malaysia then allowed me to take the next step to Singapore.
So tell us about Singapore.
So Singapore, we one race course at Kranji. I'm one of 3 English-speaking broadcasters, commentators at the Turf Club. We've got both an English and a Chinese broadcast channel. And yeah, look, it's great. I mean, you know, a lot of people that would be watching this would remember the international races we used to have in May. Obviously they're no longer, but the plan is to get them back. And that certainly had Singapore on the world stage. And that's how I first sort of got attracted to Singapore. You know, and sort of Luca Kamani was sending horses, and Andrew Balding would send horses, you know, Phoenix Reach and all these sort of horses all would go on their travels. And look, it's a great facility. I love working there. And again, it's got some really good friends. Some big names have been and gone. I mean, Derby winner Alan Munro was there for a long time. He's in South Korea at the moment, but you know, when you turn up at the track in the morning, and guys like Alan Munro, Glenn Boss, you know, Mackay Diva fame, he's just gone back to Australia. Lee Freeman's a champion trainer. I mean, he trained the great mare. You know, it's a really interesting place to be. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, I don't work a day. I don't do a day's work. You know, it's not work at all. It's very much pleasure.
So what are the major differences and challenges compared to England?
I think probably the most notable one, Simon, would be the weather, the heat. You know, obviously we've got a lovely day here today, and you know, obviously it's British summertime, so it's always going to be quite nice. But over there, it's constant. You know, it's very hot, very humid, very sticky, and when you're working in it and broadcasting and that sort of thing, it can be tough. But in regards to differences as far as the actual racing model goes, it is different. It's very much a sort of an Australian sort of style. Obviously Hong Kong, and you know, our pari-mutuel betting and our handicap system and that sort of thing. It's quite. I find it quite rigid. You know, like the handicap system, for instance, which we've got class of race, and you know, unlike England, where sort of, you know, the handicapper has a lot of discretion and horses can probably stay in a grade and win a few more races or whatnot. Over there, it's very clear cut. So I think when you're doing a form, it can be quite obvious at times. But look, it's very good in the respect that everything's in one place. So we've got probably 1,000 or more horses, 30 trainers, 30 jockeys, and to get a handle on the form is very straightforward. I mean, you're never going to tip the card, don't get me wrong, it's not that easy, but the actual model is slightly different. But I suppose the biggest differences and the challenges, I think, yeah, you know, the heat and the conditions. But I mean, ultimately, it's racing. We've got a top quality race course, and you know, it's great sport there. You know, it's well received and it always gets a good following. But as far as the differences go, I would say just the locality, really. The sort of just the conditions we've got to work in are obviously very different, and that can be a little bit taxing at times.
And how popular is it? Is it like Hong Kong? I mean, do you get that many people how many people would come on an average meeting?
Yeah, so you don't. I mean, we wouldn't be as big as Hong Kong. And in regards to attendances, I mean, we get a healthy crowd, but we wouldn't get sort of the same numbers as Hong Kong. I mean, when you look at a Happy Valley on a Wednesday night, I mean, that's phenomenal. I've been very lucky to have a few nice trips to Hong Kong and go to the international races and stuff like that. And the way Hong Kong do things is wonderful. They're the envy of the world, you know. I mean, obviously here in the UK, we've got some great race courses. And I feel racing now here in England has really gone to another level. You know, I think there's a lot of nice changes being implemented, and you know, racing is becoming obviously very popular, and you know, they get a lot of people here at Goodwood and so on. But in regards to Singapore, I mean, you know, it could do with a little sort of, you know, breath of fresh air. It could do with a sort of a new lease of life. I think it can get a little bit stale. And I think our biggest undoing is that under 18s can't go racing. You know, and we can't really advertise our racing with certain restrictions on government and law, which is tough, because you know, you're trying to promote the product, and it's sort of you're sort of restricted that little bit. But I think hopefully in time, if they open it up, and maybe, you know, they can sort of encourage the younger sort of group and the younger generation, maybe get them involved in ownership and membership, and you know, get them up there. But you know, Kranji's stuck out up in the north, which is not ideal. But I guess, you know, when they were looking to build a new race course, they had to, you know, find the land to build it, and that's where it is. But no, look, it's very popular, always will be. I think the Asian culture, as far as having a bet's concerned, is one that will always be there, and that will never fall away. So look, it is very well received, and it's well received internationally. You know, I read an email from work today. Our races are going to the States. We're going to be, you know, beamed into the US now. So, you know, the races go to Australia, New Zealand, the UK, France, America. So our racing is received, and people do come across it, and hopefully, perhaps we're bringing back the international races in time. That will then take us back to a level where we can compete, worldwide. But as far as the local racing goes, it's a very good model. It's a great track, and it continues to get its support.
There's something that I've seen that you do over there. I think it'd be quite good fun if they did it over here. That's interviewing winners on horseback.
Yeah.
Now, I can see Luke Harvey and the ex-jockeys would be fine, but do you think Nick Luck should have a go?
I think Lucky should have a go. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure Nick turned his hand to most things. Look, I mean that was something really enjoyable. So over at Kranji, they've got like the outriders and the ponies that take them to the start, and we had the idea that maybe we should do some interviews on horseback. And it was funny actually, because the couple of guys I was working with, Matthew Jones, he was actually allergic to horses and still is. He's actually moved back to Australia. And Tom Wood, who was also there at the time, is now in Hong Kong. I think he had very little interest in riding a horse. That certainly wasn't him. So almost by default, it was down to me. And I sort of said, well, yeah, let's do it. And again, going back to your earlier question about differences and talking about the conditions and the heat. I mean, that was probably one of the most unpleasurable experiences. Doing that, interviewing on the pony, because it was just so hot, and you're out there and you come back. You probably lost 5 or 6 kilos in sweat just by being out on the horse. But it was great fun. And sadly we don't do it as much now, but the interviews on the horse were great, and it just added another dimension to our broadcast. Whether or not it's something that they'll implement here, perhaps at certain meetings, I don't know. And I think Leslie Graham used to do it, didn't she, years ago, maybe at Cheltenham and places like that. But it's very popular in Australia, but whether or not it would take off here, I don't quite know. But as far as some of the presenters go, I think they should all have a go.
Now, you've admitted yourself that you're quite a nomadic sort of person. You reach your life goal before you're even 30. So, what's next? Are you is that this you now? Have you got other ambitions?
Yeah, definite ambitions. There are certain races I would love to call, and one of them would be sort of a portion of the Grand National. That's always been one that's been in the back of my mind. I mean, if I could do that, whether it be for radio or for television or whatever, it would be super. I'd love that. That would be amazing. I think ultimately, Simon, the ambitions are to get back to the UK at some stage. Hopefully, get into a nice job and a nice position here. And just I love my racing. Full stop. So it's sort of to be involved in those big days. Royal Ascots, Goodwoods, Aintrees, Cheltenhams. I mean, I've done it as a groom. I've been involved, spectator or whatnot, and obviously a bit of broadcasting as well. But I really want to. I'd love to come back here and really get sort of into a nice position, potentially in time to sort of cover these meetings. And I feel where I'm at now. I'm settled, and I see myself there for a few years yet. But it certainly won't be where I'll be sort of staying. Home is always home, and hopefully in time that's where I'll come back to. So I think it's always just a case of trying to improve. I just want to be the best I can be, and work with good people. I think is always a big plus. You've got to do that, and I think if you surround yourself with the right people and you learn from them, then you're going to progress, aren't you? So I think it's just a case of continuing to progress and just sort of do the best you can, really.
So for somebody Googling you in 2028, just about to interview you, where are you going to be?
2028. I mean, hopefully we'll be back in the UK. I mean, a nice position at Racing TV or Sky Sports would be quite handy. But yeah, look, I mean, I really don't know. I mean, Hong Kong is somewhere that I'd always consider. I mean, that could open up in time. And like you said, I love travelling. I love seeing new places. I love seeing racing elsewhere, and I think the fact that there are so many different jurisdictions where obviously it's English speaking, there are certain possibilities. I mean, I would say go wind the clock back 10 years, I probably would never have considered or thought that I'd be in Singapore calling races, which and I've called a Group 1 race, which was great. I called a Raffles Cup last year. That was to call a Group 1 by the age of 31 or 32, 31. It was fantastic. And that's sort of something that a lot of race callers probably might never get to. And I got to call a very good horse called Debt Collector winning a Group 1. So I love that. And as far as say 10 years time goes and where I'll be, hopefully I've just continued to strive and go forward and just sort of wind up in a nice position somewhere and doing what I enjoy basically. I mean, I just love what I do.
Excellent, Luke Child. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.